The screen flickered in the quiet war room. Empress Selena's face filled the display, cold as deep space. Her eyes, sharp like broken glass, stared at Earth's leaders. "Surrender by dawn," she commanded. "More my Shadow Legion will turn your cities into graves." Her image vanished, leaving only silence. General Roy Carter slammed his fist on the table. Never. Around him, Earth's council shifted nervously. Maps glowed with enemy ships hovering above Tokyo, Cairo, and New Geneva, Earth's last stronghold. "They outgun us 1,000 to 1, whispered a councilwoman. "How do we fight an army of assassins?" Carter's gaze hardened. "We don't send an army, we send two." Murmurs spread like cracks in ice. He tapped a file. Two faces appeared. A young man with calm eyes and a scar across his cheek, and an old woman wrapped in furs, standing before a creaking hut in a Siberian blizzard. "Ken Sato," Carter said. "A ghost. Trained in every killing art that ever existed. His tech lets him walk through walls and vanish in plain sight." The image shifted to show Ken balancing on a Tokyo skyscraper's edge, wind whipping his dark hair. And Agnes Petrova, they call her Baba Yaga. Her hut moves on metal legs, and her mind can shatter steel. She's defended Earth's wild places for 50 years. Alone, doubt hung thick in the air. 2 against 500? A general scoffed. Madness. "Agreed," Carter said grimly. "But there are only madness left." As dawn bled over Siberia, snow crunched under heavy boots. Soldiers in black armor approached Agnes Petrova's hut. Its walls groaned, shifting like a waking beast. "Shh." The commander's voice boomed through a helmet speaker. "By order of Empress Selene, you will." The hut's door creaked open. Agnes stepped out, small and bent, her breath frosting the air. She wore patched furs, and her eyes glowed faintly blue. "Tell your Empress," she rasped. "Old women need their sleep." She raised a hand. The snow around the soldiers rippled, then rose in a whirlwind, slamming them backward. The hut's wooden legs screeched, digging deep into the ice. Agnes smiled, showing crooked teeth. "Now run home." In Tokyo, neon lights painted the rain-slick streets. Ken Sato moved like smoke through an alley. Above him, 3 Empire scouts in cloaking suits scanned the rooftops, their weapons humming. Ken didn't look up. He flicked a small disc from his sleeve. It attached to a wall, projecting a perfect copy of himself, sprinting down the street. The scouts fired. Their lasers tore through the hologram just as Ken dropped behind them. Twin blades, glowing like captured lightning, flashed once. 2 scouts fell silently. The third spun, but Ken was already gone. A whisper in his ear. "Tell your Legion." Ken's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "Earth is closed." Back in New Geneva, Carter watched the reports. Agnes freezing a dropship solid in midair. Ken turning an Empire outpost into a maze of traps and illusions. A slow grin spread across his face. The Council's doubt had melted into wary hope. On the main screen, Selene reappeared, fury tightening her lips. "You think 2 street magicians can stop me?" Carter leaned forward. "They're not magicians, Empress. They're humanity's bite." He switched off the feed, turning to his aide. "Bring them to New Geneva. The real fight starts now." Far away, Ken Sato melted into shadow. Agnes Petrova's hut clanked toward the horizon, leaving deep prints in the snow. Somewhere, 500 assassins readied their weapons, and Earth held its breath. The night sky over Earth cracked open, like dark seeds falling. The dropships of the Shadow Legion plunged towards the planet. 500 killers, wrapped in silent metal suits and armed with weapons that hummed with deadly energy, scattered across the globe. Their leader, Commander Silas Rook, watched from high orbit. His face was hard, his eyes like chips of ice. His orders were simple. Break Earth's spirit. Start with its capitals. In Paris, the night was wet. Rain slicked the ancient stones. Ken Sato stood perfectly still in the shadows of a narrow alley near the old catacombs. He didn't blink. He sensed them coming. 5 Legion assassins moving like ghosts through the rain, their cloaks shimmering slightly. They were hunting the city's leaders. Ken moved. He wasn't there, and then he was. Small device, no bigger than a coin, dropped from his hand. It hit the wet pavement. Instantly, 3 glowing copies of Ken appeared, sprinting down different streets. The assassins hesitated, confused. That was enough. Ken dropped silently behind the nearest one. His plasma blades, humming with blue light, flashed once. The assassin crumpled without a sound. Ken was already gone, melting into the darkness beside a stone arch. He threw another device, its one shot thin, nearly invisible wires across the alley entrance. The second assassin ran into them, tripped, and Ken was on him in a blur of movement. 2 down. Silas Rook watched this on a screen aboard his ship, relayed by a small flying camera. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Focus on the real one," he hissed into his communicator. The remaining assassins turned, weapons searching the rooftops. Under the blazing sun of Cairo, sand whipped through the streets. 3 Legion dropships landed near the Great Pyramids. Soldiers poured out, their black armor stark against the golden sand. Their target was a hidden command center beneath the Sphinx. They didn't see the small, strange hut sitting crookedly on a nearby dune. It looked old and forgotten. As the assassins advanced, the hut groaned. Wooden panels shifted. With a sound like grinding stones, thick metal legs unfolded from beneath it, lifting the hut high off the sand. It stood now like a giant spidery machine. The door creaked open. Agnes Petrova stepped out, squinting in the harsh light. She looked small and frail against the armored figures. "Go home," she called out, her voice surprisingly strong. "This sand is too hot for playing soldier." The assassins laughed, a harsh sound through their helmet speakers. They raised their weapons. Agnes sighed. She closed her eyes for a second. Then her eyes snapped open, glowing that faint, unsettling blue. She raised her hands, palms out. The sand directly in front of the lead soldiers didn't just swirl. It exploded upwards in a dense cloud, blinding them. At the same time, a wave of pure mental force, invisible but crushing, slammed into the next group. They froze mid-step, their bodies locked rigid, weapons falling from paralyzed fingers. They couldn't move, couldn't scream, trapped inside their own armor by the old woman's will. Agnes didn't stop. She made a small gesture. One of the hut's huge metal legs slammed down, crushing a dropship like a tin can. Another leg swept sideways, sending assassins flying through the air like broken toys. The remaining soldiers scrambled back, firing wildly. Their energy bolts sizzled harmlessly against an invisible shield shimmering around Agnes and her walking hut. She just watched them flee, a faint, tired smile on her lips. Silas Rook saw the reports from Cairo flash on his screen. His annoyance turned to cold fury. This old woman and her ridiculous hut were an insult. He watched the replay of Ken Sato effortlessly picking off his best hunters in Paris. 2 people. Only 2, and they were making his elite legion look like clumsy children. He slammed his fist on the console. This wasn't just about killing leaders anymore. This was about crushing defiance. He needed something bigger. Something that would shatter Earth's hope completely. His fingers flew over a console, pulling up schematics stolen during the initial scans of Earth's defenses. Blueprints glowed. The massive core power reactors deep beneath the city of New Geneva, the heart of Earth's resistance. A cruel smile touched his lips. Overload those reactors, and the resulting explosion wouldn't just destroy the city. It would tear a chunk out of the continent. "Change of plans," Silas commanded his crew, his voice tight with anger. "All units converge on New Geneva. Ignore the other targets. We hit their heart. We hit it hard." He looked at the images of Ken Sato vanishing into Parisian shadows and Agnes Petrova standing defiant before her metal-legged hut. "And when we level their city, those 2 freaks will be buried under the rubble." New Geneva stood like a fortress under a bruised sky. Walls of reinforced concrete and shimmering energy shields rose high around the city. Inside, soldiers scrambled. Tanks rumbled into position. Fear hung heavy in the air. The Shadow Legion was coming. Ken Sato moved silently through the city's tallest building. His hands placed small, disc-shaped devices at key points on the walls and support beams. Each disc emitted a low hum. Sonic mines. They wouldn't destroy. Would disorient, shatter concentration, turn the city into a maze of painful sound for the invaders. He worked fast, a shadow against the glass. Outside the main eastern gate, the ground shook. Agnes Petrova's hut, the Izba, stood, planted firmly on its thick metal legs. Agnes stood before it, her eyes closed, her weathered face tight with focus. A faint blue light pulsed from her, spreading outwards like ripples on a pond. It touched the city's main energy shield, merging with it. The shield shimmered, gaining a deeper, more resilient glow. It was holding, but Agnes swayed slightly. Keeping it strong against the coming assault was draining her. Commander Silas Rook's dropships screamed down from orbit. They didn't land. They hovered just outside the shield's range. Hatches opened. Black armored figures rappelled down thick cables, hitting the ground like rain. Hundreds of them. They formed up silently, weapons ready. Silas's voice crackled over their helmet comms. Break them. Gate. Snipers. High ground. Reactor team, with me. Go. The attack exploded. Laser fire erupted, slamming against Agnes's reinforced shield. It held, but sparks flew where the beams hit hardest. On the eastern wall, a concentrated barrage of energy blasts and powerful grenades focused on one section. The reinforced concrete groaned, then cracked. With a roar, a section of the wall crumbled inward. Legion soldiers in heavier armor stormed through the gap, firing relentlessly. Earth soldiers met them, the narrow breach becoming a churning mess of laser fire and desperate close combat. High above, dark figures scaled skyscrapers, Silas's snipers. They found perches. Silent, deadly beams lanced down from rooftops. Earth soldiers manning anti-aircraft guns fell. Officers coordinating the defense dropped. Panic began to spread through the defenders. Ken saw the snipers, sprinted across a rooftop, leaping the gap to the next building. He spotted a sniper lining up another shot. Ken didn't hesitate. He threw a small shuriken, glowing with blue plasma. It flew silently, embedding itself in the sniper's weapon, shorting it out in a shower of sparks. Before the sniper could react, Ken was upon him. A swift strike, rendering him unconscious. But there were too many snipers, too many rooftops. Silas and his personal team moved like vipers through the chaos near the breached wall. They ignored the main fight, slipping through side streets and maintenance tunnels. Their target was clear: the massive underground power complex that fueled New Geneva and its shields. Ken saw Silas breaking away. He knew where they were headed. He dropped from his rooftop, landing lightly and sprinting after them. He caught up just as Silas's team blasted open a heavy security door leading down into the city's depths. Inside the reactor complex, the air thrummed with raw power. Giant columns pulsed with contained energy. Silas stood near a central control panel, his elite guards forming a perimeter. Ken stepped out of the shadows near the entrance. "Stop, Rook," Ken stated, his voice flat, his plasma blades igniting with a sharp hiss. Silas turned, a cruel smile visible beneath his helmet's visor. He drew his own weapon, a long, crackling energy blade. "The ghost come to die where it's warm?" His guards raised their weapons. Ken moved. He became a blur, dodging laser fire, closing the distance to Silas. Their blades met in a shower of white sparks. Ken's agile plasma against Silas's heavier, crackling energy soared. Ken was faster, striking like lightning. Silas was stronger, his armor deflecting glancing blows. They danced across the metal gantry, high above the humming reactor core. Ken landed a solid kick on Silas's chest, staggering him back. Silas roared, swinging wildly, forcing Ken to leap aside. Outside, Agnes felt the pressure on the shield intensify, as more Legion forces focused their fire. She poured more of her strength into the psychic barrier. The blue light around her flared brightly. She saw the snipers picking off defenders. Gritting her teeth, she focused her will away from the shield for just a moment. A section of a distant bridge groaned, its supports buckling under invisible force. It collapsed onto a squad of Legion grenadiers, pushing towards the gate. The crash was immense. But the momentary distraction cost her. A sniper high on a building, seeing the old woman standing exposed before her hut, took careful aim. A single, silent energy beam lanced down. It struck Agnes high in the shoulder. She cried out, a sound of shock and pain, stumbling back against the cold metal leg of her hut. The city's shield wavered, becoming thin and pale. Agnes gasped, clutching her shoulder. Blood, dark against her worn furs, seeped through her fingers. The pain was a white-hot fire. Above her, the city's shield flickered like a dying candle, its pale light barely holding back the Legion's relentless fire. Soldiers near the eastern gate cried out as the weakened shield allowed more blasts through, scattering them. Inside the reactor complex, Ken and Silas clashed again. Sparks flew as their blades met, Ken darting around Silas's heavier strikes. He saw the flicker of the shield through a high window. He saw Agnes stagger. He knew. Ken blocked a vicious swing from Silas, the impact jarring his arms. He needed to get outside. Silas laughed, a harsh sound in the thrumming chamber. Your witch is finished. Your shield falls. He pressed his attack, forcing Ken back towards the humming reactor core. Ken's mind raced. He couldn't fight Silas and his guards and help Agnes, not alone. Suddenly a voice, weak but clear, whispered inside Ken's mind. Agnes can... the river docks... lure them... to the water. The mental contact was faint, strained with pain, but the image was sharp. The flooded industrial zone near the city's edge, where the river met crumbling warehouses. Ken understood. He feigned a stumble, ducking under Silas's blade. He threw a small smoke pellet at Silas's feet. Thick gray smoke billowed out. Before Silas could react, Ken was gone, a shadow melting into a service duct. Outside, Agnes leaned heavily against her hut. The Isba, her face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cold. The blue glow around her was weak, sputtering. She looked at the hut, placing her bloody hand flat against its rough wooden wall. Old friend, she whispered, her voice thick with pain. Time for ... one last trick. Not the sound of shifting wood and metal legs, but a deeper, stranger sound, like a million tiny insects buzzing. The wood itself seemed to shimmer. Then, the entire structure began to dissolve. It didn't fall apart, it flowed. The wood, the metal, the strange glowing panels, all broke down into a swirling, silvery cloud of tiny particles like liquid mercury caught in a whirlwind. The cloud hovered for a second around Agnes, then streamed away, flowing like water along the ground. Vanishing into storm drains and sewer grates, Ken emerged near the river docks. The area was half flooded, oily water lapping against the foundations of old warehouses. Pipes and walkways crisscrossed the murky water. Silas and his elite guard burst out of a nearby street, furious, weapons scanning the gloom. Find him, Silas roared. He can't hide here. Ken stepped onto a rusty walkway over the water. Looking for me, Rook, he called out. Silas spotted him, a dark figure against the greasy water. There, surround him. The guards fanned out, moving onto walkways and platforms, trapping Ken near the center. Silas advanced, his energy blade casting a harsh light on the filthy water. End of the line, Ghost. You and the witch die here. Ken stood calmly. He saw movement beneath the dark water's surface. Not fish. Ripples moving against the current, silvery swirls. Agnes's swarm was here. Silas raised his blade for the killing strike. Empress Celine sends her regards. Suddenly, the water beside Silas exploded upwards. Not water. Thick metallic tentacles, gleaming like liquid silver, erupted from the depths. They whipped around Silas's arms and legs before he could react, yanking him off his feet with terrifying strength. He crashed into the oily water with a shout. All around the dock, more tendrils surged from the water. They wrapped around Legion guards, dragging them screaming off the walkways and under the surface. Panic erupted. Laser fire sliced wildly, uselessly, through the flowing metal shapes that just reformed instantly. Ken didn't move. He watched Silas struggle in the water, encased in living metal that tightened like steel cables. Silas's helmet cracked under the pressure. Its eyes, wide with disbelief and terror, met Ken's. Then, from the swirling silver mass holding Silas, a figure began to form. It rose from the water, towering 50 feet tall, was a woman, ancient and powerful, made of shimmering, ghostly silver light. Her hair was wild, her eyes blazing blue fire. She looked exactly like the legends of Baba Yaga, but forged from Agnes Petrova's will and the sentient nanoswarm. The giant spectral figure raised a clawed hand, poised over the helpless Silas Rook trapped in the water below. Inside her crumbling command post near the ruined gate, Agnes Petrova slumped against a broken wall. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. The last of her strength flowed out, not into the shield, but into the giant silver Avenger miles away at the docks. A single tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek as she poured her life, her defiance, into the phantom shape. The real fight wasn't over, but Silas Rook's part in it was ending. The giant silver figure of Baba Yaga towered over the flooded docks. Her eyes burning blue fire, fixed on Commander Silas Rook, struggling helplessly in the oily water. The liquid metal tendrils held him tight. He screamed defiance, but it was a thin, desperate sound. The spectral hand formed from Agnes Petrova's will, and the swirling nanoswarm swept down. It didn't touch him physically. It passed through him. Silas Rook arched his back, a silent scream tearing from his throat. Inside his heavy armor, lights flickered and died. The holographic claws tore at his very being, shredding his resolve, his arrogance, his life force. The crushing metal tendrils dissolved back into the water as Silas went limp, his lifeless body floating face down. Ken Sato stood on the walkway watching. He saw the terror in the remaining Legion guards' eyes as the giant figure turned its blazing gaze upon them. The silver swarm surged from the water again, not as tentacles, but as a wave. It washed over the walkways, engulfing the soldiers. They vanished beneath the shimmering, relentless tide. Silence fell over the docks, broken only by the lap of water. High above Earth, aboard her command ship, Empress Selene watched the feed from the docks go dark. She saw the last images, her finest commander destroyed, his elite guards consumed by living metal, the towering Phantom Witch. Her face, usually cold and controlled, twisted with fury. She slammed her fist onto the armrest of her throne. "No," she hissed. The Shadow Legion was broken. Her perfect weapon shattered by two ... things. "Recall all forces," she commanded, her voice tight with barely contained rage. "Immediate retreat." She couldn't risk more losses, not to these monsters Earth had unleashed. Her eyes burned as she stared at the blue planet below. "This isn't over," she vowed to the empty bridge. "I will return, and I will burn that world to ash." On the ground in New Geneva, the Legion soldiers attacking the city felt the shift instantly. Orders crackled in their helmets. Retreat. Disengage. The relentless assault faltered, then stopped. Black armored figures began pulling back, scrambling for their dropships. The city's shield, thin and weak, finally held. Cheers, ragged and disbelieving, rose from the exhausted defenders. Ken appeared near the ruined eastern gate. He saw General Roy Carter directing medics. Carter spotted Ken and nodded, relief washing over his face. Ken gave a small, almost imperceptible nod back. His eyes scanned the area, searching. He found Agnes Petrova slumped against a pile of rubble near where her hut had stood. She looked impossibly small and frail. Her eyes were closed, her face pale as chalk, her breathing shallow. The wound on her shoulder was a dark stain. Ken knelt beside her silently. He didn't speak, simply placed a small, disc-shaped device gently on the ground near her hand. It hummed softly, emitting a faint warmth. A portable heater and basic medical monitor. A soft grinding sound came from nearby. From storm drains and broken pipes, the silvery nanoswarm flowed back. It pooled on the cracked ground, shimmering and shifting. Slowly, impossibly, it began to rebuild itself. Wood grain formed. Metal legs took shape. Panels locked into place. Within minutes, Agnes's hut, the Izba, stood whole again, creaking softly in the cold wind. Its door swung open. Agnes's eyes fluttered open. They were dimmer now. The blue glow faded almost to nothing. She saw Ken, saw her hut. A faint, weary smile touched her lips. She said nothing. With a strength that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside, she pushed herself up. Ken offered no help, but his presence was steady. Agnes stumbled the few steps to her hut. She paused at the doorway, leaning heavily on the frame. She didn't look back at Ken or the city. She simply stepped inside. The door creaked shut. The hut's metal legs groaned as it turned. Then, with surprising speed, it clanked away, heading north, leaving deep prints in the churned earth. It moved steadily towards the distant frozen Arctic, becoming a small, strange shape against the horizon until it vanished into the swirling mists. Ken watched it go. He remained still for a long moment. Then he turned and walked towards the spot where Silas Rook's body had been pulled from the water. Soldiers were examining the broken armor. Embedded deep in the chest plate, where the heart would be, was a single, perfectly placed plasma shuriken, its blue light still faintly glowing. Ken didn't retrieve it, simply melted back into the shadows of the damaged city, disappearing as completely as Agnes had. In the war room, General Carter received the final report. He looked at the image of the shuriken in Silas Rook's armor, then at the last satellite trace of Agnes's hut disappearing into the Arctic. He walked to the main communication console. He opened a channel aimed at the retreating Imperial fleet, broadcasting on all frequencies. His voice, strong and clear, carried across the void. Empress Celine, you sent an assassin legion. You sent only 2. A pause hung in the air, heavy with defiance. Next time, send more legions. Carter allowed a hard smile. You have more than 2. The transmission ended. Across Earth, the message echoed. They had faced annihilation. They had fought back with ghosts and legends, and they had won. For now. The stars seemed a little less cold.